And at this juncture, I would like to invite the Honorable Aruna Kasolo, who is the Acting Foreign Affairs Minister. You will know him also as a member of SEC for the NRM for Buganda region. Minister, welcome to make your remarks.
Thank you very much. My fellow countrymen and women, and the entire international community, ladies and gentlemen, today it is a very important day in the history of Uganda as I present to you our candidate for the position of the Secretary General for the United Nations, the Ambassador Olara Otunnu, who has been duly endorsed by His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Uganda and the entire government. With me is the Right Honorable Dr. Luhana Lugunda, who is well known to you and is going to take the lead in the mobilization for support for our candidate. I now take this opportunity to invite him to tell us how he's going to do it. Then later, he will invite the Honorable Ambassador Adonian Ayebare, who is also the Minister Designate for Foreign Affairs. And then we shall have our candidate to speak to the entire nation. I thank you. Can I now invite the Right Honorable Lugunda to tell us how we are going to achieve this victory? Right Honorable Lugunda.
Ndu Kasuja, in charge of this center, the ministers, and Ndugu Olara Otunnu. It's my pleasure to be here. I salute you, Ndu Kasuja, because the media center has changed the shape. The last time I was here, we were squeezed in that place. I can see you have opened up. Congratulations. I'll say a few words about my brother Olara Otunnu. I've known Olara Otunnu for more than 50 years. And we have actually, all those 50 years, worked closely together. I first interacted with him at Makerere University when he was a law student and I was in middle school, a couple of years ahead of him. We elected him to be, overwhelmingly elected him to be the president of Makerere Students Guild. A job he did very well, so well that he even clashed with Idi Amin, who was the president at the time. And he had to flee for his life and ended up completing his studies at Oxford University and graduate studies at Harvard University. His main activity has been the public and diplomatic service, and at the UN, where he worked for many years, he has undertaken a number of positions. He was for a couple of times or so president of the UN Security Council. That is, Uganda was the president, and he was the permanent representative of Uganda. During that time, when he was president of the UN Security Council, Olara Otunnu did the unusual. What is this unusual? The United Nations was often paralyzed by the election and the controversies about getting new secretary generals. Olara Otunnu, as president, developed innovatively the position of having a straw ballot in a manner that the balloting would start early until there was consensus. He's the expert on it, and I'm glad we have the innovator of it, and we'll be talking about it. But since that time, it has been the standard method of selection of the Secretary General of UN. And I'm glad that he's going to most probably benefit from his own formula. And as far as the local politics is concerned, he has spent some bit of time in local politics. He was at one stage president of the Uganda People's Congress and even contested for the presidency. So he has not only had an international profile, but has also had a national profile. He will actually be talking about himself. That's why he's here. So that you know who Olara Otunnu is, who is this person that has been endorsed by President Museveni and the government of Uganda. Let me point out one issue. That Olara Otunnu used to be an opponent of President Museveni, as you all know. I'm extremely happy to say that because of the political reconciliation and development and bring together the country, now it is Yoweri Museveni, President of Uganda, who is proposing and endorsing Olara Otunnu to be Uganda's candidate for the position of the Secretary General of the United Nations. I regard this as a very significant development. I congratulate both Yoweri Museveni, our president, and I also congratulate Ndugu Olara Otunnu for this level of reconciliation to ensure that we as a country are moving together on national issues and on international issues. It's therefore my great pleasure to invite Ndugu Olara Otunnu, who all of you are waiting to listen to come and give you his message. Thank you.
Prime Minister Dr. Ruakana Rugunda, Minister Kasolo, Minister Designate, and Uganda's permanent representative at the United Nations, Ambassador Adonia Ayebare, my good friend Alan Kasuja, and the team at Media Center. Actually, being here casts my mind back to the streets of London where we first met. We literally bumped into each other in the streets of London. That's how we met several years back. So I thank you for convening this media encounter, and I thank you, members of the media, for being here today. Let me begin by expressing my very sincere appreciation to President Yoweri Museveni and the government of Uganda, who saw it fit to propose Olara Otunnu as a candidate for the position of the UN Secretary General. I'm enormously grateful, and I appreciate this gesture on the part of the president and the government of Uganda. I want to express I'm very touched by the sentiments which are aboard of the people of Uganda. Because if today Olara Otunnu is standing here as a candidate for the UN Secretary Generalship, it is because of Ugandans and Uganda. I am shaped and formed by this country, very proud of my country and very proud of my compatriots. So if the world today has seen it fit to consider my candidature, the credit goes to the people of Uganda and to Uganda. To my teachers along the way, to my parents, to my schoolmates, to those with whom we fought in the trenches in the Idi Amin years, including Prime Minister Ruakana Rugunda, and to all the well-wishers. I also hope that my being considered for this position sends a signal, a message to the little boys and girls all over this country, wherever they might be, in schools, in rural areas and towns, that if one of us, a son of the soil, somebody born, formed, and shaped here, can be considered for this position, then they can hope and aspire themselves to great and greater things. I hope this is part of the benefit of this candidature for our country, for our children, for our young people, and that our parents will not tell our young people, this is not for you, the ceiling here, this is only for those who are from London or Tokyo or Lagos. No, there's no ceiling. We have a nation of highly talented people. Given the opportunity, nurtured and developed, we can do great things not only in our country, but around the world. So I'm very grateful to my compatriots, very proud of you. I hope I will do well by you. I want to say a word about the person who is going to be leading our charge, who is going to be the leader of our lobbying team, which is Prime Minister, Right Honorable Dr. Ruakana Rugunda. I said Alan Kasuj and I bumped into each other literally in the streets of London. Well, Dr. Ruakana Rugunda and I, we go back a long way. This is a sweet reunion. We cut our teeth in the common struggle against the Idi Amin regime when he was the president of NUSU, National Union of Students of Uganda, very important, powerful body in the country at the time. And when I then also became the president of the Makerere Students Guild. We have remained close over the years. Even if our political paths may have diverged, our souls have remained the same. And so this project, which has come together as a project of Uganda, a national project that brings us together, regardless of our views, regardless of our divergences, regardless of our arguments and disputations, I'm very happy that we are working on this together. He's my twin brother. He is Opio. I am Ochen. So I'm very happy that we are in this project together. Now, first, let me say, just in terms of explaining things, why is our team still in Kampala when the process of selecting the Secretary General has already started? The reason is that there are three countries, Uganda, South Sudan, and DRC, who are on the ban list, Ebola ban list for the US. People from the 3 countries cannot enter the US in a normal, routine way. So we've had to cool our heels here, discussing with Washington and petitioning for a waiver to make it possible for us to leave Kampala and go to the US. I think we are very close to getting a positive answer, and I want to thank the government of the United States for really bending over backwards to be very helpful to all of us, to Ambassador Adonia Yebare, to Prime Minister Ruakana Rugunda, myself, and others who are going to be in the delegation. So we hope that very soon the delegation of Uganda, the lobbying team, will join the other candidates who are ready in New York. So that's the reason why we are still here, but hopefully soon we shall be in New York. As you may know, there are 7 candidates, Olara, Otunnu being the 7th to enter the race, and they come from all over the world. To be elected Secretary General, you need the approval, the recommendation of the Security Council, the 15-member body, but you also need the ratification of all members of the United Nations, that is the General Assembly. In reality, the main decision, the critical decision is made by the Security Council, the 15-member body. And within the Security Council, those at the front row are the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. To be elected, you need to gain 9 positive votes from any of the 15 members, regardless, any of the 15 members, whether they're permanent or they're elected members, it doesn't matter. But you need at least 9 votes. And you need to avoid a negative vote by a permanent member. The negative vote is often referred to as a veto. You need to avoid a veto. And that takes us to the Otunnu formula. Alan was asking me about this yesterday. You've been reading a lot about the Otunnu formula. What is the Otunnu formula? The Otunnu formula was invented in December 1981 when Olara Otunnu, representing Uganda in the Security Council, was the president of the Security Council. At that time, for almost 6 months, the Security Council had been deadlocked over the issue of electing the Secretary General. The candidates were Kurt Waldheim, the incumbent then, and Prime Minister Salim of Tanzania. So when I became president, I said to members of the Security Council, let us stop, let us cool it, let us try to think through this and come up with a method that is more informal to move forward. Because for now, 6 months or so, the formal ballots had been going on with no successful outcome. That is when the Otunnu formula was born. So I came up with an arrangement suggested to members of the Security Council that we try to gauge what I call encouragement. So when you say encourage is something indicated by all the 15 members. They indicate which candidate they would encourage. The purpose of encourage is to gauge the potential of a candidate to receive 9 votes, 9 positive votes. So encouragement tries to informally gauge the vote gathering potential of that candidate. Then discourage, which in the end will only be done by the permanent members, is a way to gauge the ability of a candidate either to attract a veto or to avoid vetoes altogether. So discourage in the end will be indicated only by the 5 permanent members. So the encourage straw balloting and the discouraged straw balloting is what Olara Otunnu designed in December 1981. It worked. It produced Perez de Cuellar, Secretary General Perez de Cuellar. And since that time, the Security Council has used it for the election of every Secretary General, including this season's election. So that is the so-called Otunnu formula. It bears the name of one of you, bears the name of a Ugandan up in the Security Council. So that is how the procedure works. Now, the Otunnu formula has already been engaged, which is to say the train has already left the station in terms of the process of selecting the Secretary General. The first round of the Otunnu formula was held, I think, last Thursday. We are now waiting for a second round, which will be probably later this month. We don't know when yet. They will let us know. So that is where we are. The rest of the candidates are in New York or their various capitals. They have been canvassing and campaigning for a long time. So we have some catching up to do. And hopefully we shall also soon be in situ in New York and canvass the votes of the members. Here in Kampala, what have we done so far? Two things we have done. One, the candidate, Olara Otunnu, together with the delegation, have made the rounds of members of the Security Council who are based in Kampala. Not all of them are based in Kampala. The permanent members are all here, and then I think we have maybe 5 other members, elected members, also in Kampala. We've done bilateral calls, courtesy calls on all of them. And then a very big thing happened yesterday when the president convened an encounter with all members of the Security Council who are based in Kampala to let them know directly from him his own commitment and the commitment of the government of Uganda for this candidature. And that took place yesterday at State House. So that is where we are in terms of what has been done in Kampala. We hope very soon, when the waivers come through, we'll begin with New York. That is where the action is, the seat of the United Nations. And it will take time canvassing support and expressing our views and exposing our candidature to members of the United Nations, particularly members of the Security Council. Thereafter, we might also make inroads into selected capitals, depending on time, but we'll begin with the United Nations in New York. So that is really roughly where we are in terms of the state of play. Well, let me say now a little bit about the substantive issues. First, the role of the Secretary General. The Secretary General does not wield conventional power. The power which comes from military strength, comes from resources, financial resources, comes from popular vote. The Secretary General does not wield that. But the Secretary General has at his disposal what we might call soft power, moral authority. Where does this flow from? It flows from 2 important sources. First, the principles enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations. The United Nations Charter has very explicit principles to which the United Nations is committed, the purposes for which the United Nations was formed. So that is one very important source. And the second source of his moral authority, his soft power, is the support he's able or she's able to garner from member states. These are the 2 sources of his moral authority, of his soft power. And the Secretary General, therefore, should be somebody who is available, who is a good listener, listening to member states, engaging member states, who is creative in terms of suggesting ideas to member states. It must be a person who is disposed to have a good portion of humility, because he or she should be ready to hear no several times But occasionally, yes, when he's made suggestions. But his personality, his ego should, or her ego should never come in the way. So the Secretary General should be present, should be engaged, should be probing, should be listening very carefully and seeing if there are opportunities where suggestions and proposals from him might be helpful. And he should not be shy to make those proposals. So the Secretary General is somebody who builds consensus and proposes creative solutions, especially in times of crisis and deadlock. And more so in times of crisis and deadlock with geopolitical overtones. So this is my sense of the role of the Secretary General, regardless of who that person is. Now, what is it that I would propose to do right away were I to be elected Secretary General? I put out a sketch which I have called Outline of Agenda for the United Nations. That is the sketch of a vision statement. I won't go through all of it because you've already read and digested that document. I'll simply summarize. I'll simply highlight some of the major issues. One, even though the UN is now occupied with a number of issues across the board, the most important single mandate for the United Nations remains the issue of peace and security. It remains the imperative of ending wars, building peace, and preserving peace. That is the central, most important single mandate of the UN. And I think it is by that yardstick that member states, the whole world, the people of the world, judge the United Nations. And that is why I've highlighted in the vision the issue of ongoing conflicts, major conflicts, very, very important. Then, the United Nations has now been in place for over 80 years. Any organization which has been in existence 50 years plus, in any event, would be due for serious systematic review. In the case of the UN, over 80 years, absolutely so. And so the issue of the reform of the institution is very important. Because for an institution to have authority and weight, it must have legitimacy. Legitimacy comes from being effective, from being able to do things well. Now, there are two ledgers, two sides to the reform agenda of the UN. There are issues of reform that do not depend so much on the Secretary General. For example, the discussion about reforming, reorganizing, reconstituting the Security Council. The leadership in that belongs to member states. The permanent five coming to some kind of a consensus with the rest of the membership of the UN. The various regional groups discussing among themselves. But the Secretary General being a keen listener there, ready, facilitating if need be. But the lead role belongs to member states. But the area which is uniquely the province of the Secretary General, where only the Secretary General can take the leadership, strong, clear leadership, is reforming the United Nations bureaucracy, meaning the Secretariat and the various specialized agencies that fall under the Secretary General. There, the issue of, bloated bureaucracy, the issue of transparency in recruitment, the issue of having impact on the ground, the issue of having a UN that looks like the world, that everybody is more or less represented within the UN. All those issues belong to the province of the Secretary General. So I am very much committed in making sure that we do a comprehensive review, identify the areas of weaknesses, get experts who know what they're doing, including experts from the private sector. We want the best practice to come into play. And then for the Secretary General, if I'm Secretary General, to provide the leadership, saying this is what we are going to do to strengthen the organization, to improve its effectiveness, and to make its impact felt. So that is about reform. Development of developing countries particularly is very important. Countries in Africa, Asia, Latin America, very important. And my view is the following. The Secretary General does not have resources to dispense to member states. He or she doesn't have that. But again, the convening role of the Secretary General, his or her moral authority in knocking on doors, his power to suggest, the Secretary General can play a critical role in knocking on the doors of those who have resources to make resources available for development. Now, let me qualify. We are sometimes very wasteful of resources. So which developing countries am I talking about? Developing countries that have done their homework. They've done their planning. They have fought or eliminated or reduced corruption to a minimum. They want resources which will be put to good use for the benefit of their people. And that is where the Secretary General comes in to help match them with potential sources of long-term capital development finance. Then I would like to mention the issue of environment. I've been spending a good deal of my time these last several years deep in the boondocks, deep in the bush, in the womb of the countryside. And you can feel there in the villages, there with the little farmers, the impact of climate change on our societies. How the seasons have changed, the rains don't come when they used to come. So there's been a complete reshuffle of the cycle of the season, rain and sunshine, which means climate change is a major reality that is turning our world upside down. We have a responsibility to do two things. First, three things. We must not be ideological in tackling this problem. This is a practical, universal challenge. Second, we want growth, economic growth and prosperity. So we must make sure that all the factors that contribute to economic growth and prosperity are unleashed, but compatible with good stewardship of our environment. That's what we should be able to do, so that this is a win-win situation for our world. And I want to say one word about what I call the new economy. The new economy, let me say, we used to speak about the agrarian age and the agrarian revolution, agrarian economy. Then that was succeeded by the Industrial Revolution that burst open, especially in Europe and then all over the world. And now we are still in the informatics age, the age that most of you are part of and are benefiting from, the dot-com group. But it turns out that now we are on the verge of another revolution, a revolution that may dwarf all the other eras which have preceded it, which is the economy of the world, which is going to be shaped and driven by artificial intelligence. I am disappointed that when I move around our schools and universities and communities, our young people are not as clued to this as they should be. This is what is going to shape the world ahead. And so, the Secretary General, if I became Secretary General, I would immediately convene a major conclave, which has technology experts, key member states who are leading in this area, the private sector, and discuss how best we can put in place a system, a regime to regulate, to govern, to shape this massive earth-shaking development in a manner which makes artificial intelligence a public good, because it could become the opposite, a public good, and in a manner which makes that public good accessible to most people and most communities around the globe. So it should be accessible, it should be equitable, so that the benefit will be for all, not only for some. That is what I would do with regard to a regime to govern the very important potential of artificial intelligence. Perhaps I should just say one other thing. I won't go into the others. I feel very strongly that the United Nations in New York, in Geneva, in Vienna, in Nairobi, wherever, should not be a diplomatic ivory tower, glittering, very powerful, very important, but somewhat removed from what goes on at the local and community level. The United Nations should be a place where major, very important ideas, creative ideas, aspirations, standards, values are discussed and developed. They become universal for the whole world. But those aspirations, then we must find a way to take them down to the local level, and also local aspirations to come up to the United Nations. That's why I speak about from the global to the local, and from the local back to the global. I dare say that Olara Otunnu standing here is probably as good an expression of that paradigm as anybody else. You know, I spend most of my years and life working at the global level for the benefit of the whole world in countries all over the world. And then the last couple of years, spent at the national level, and then gone down to really, I think you call it grassroots here, but deep, deep down in the womb of the countryside to do some very important work in trying to rebuild, restore, resurrect a community that is radically broken as a result of over 20 years of war. That's what I've been spending my time doing, teamed up with Chief Justice Emeritus Windolo to try to do that at the local level. You can't get more local than that. So in fact, if I should succeed in becoming UN Secretary General, it will be a case of fishing me from deep in the countryside back to the global level. And I welcome that, because I'll take with me in my chest that experience. It's a very particular experience, a very important experience. It doesn't look anywhere near what it looks like from afar. And I would hope that would benefit not only Uganda, but benefit the world in terms of the interaction, the articulation between the global and the local. That really is what I wanted to share with you. Let me conclude by saying, what is it that makes Olara Otunnu perhaps well qualified, not to say uniquely qualified for this position? First, I think there are very few people, in all honesty, modesty aside, who have had as deep, as broad an experience of working at the United Nations, around the United Nations, on issues of the United Nations as myself. I served as Uganda's ambassador. I was in the Security Council, the General Assembly. I was chair of the Commission on Human Rights. A lot of the big bodies, global negotiation, new economic order, new security orders, I was involved with most of those discussions. I've also served in most of the key commissions, international commissions you'll see in my bio note over the years, which have been wrestling with issues of peace and security, issues of development, issues of human rights. I've been a member of most of those commissions. Later, I served as president of the International Peace Academy, now called International Peace Institute, which is a helpmate to the UN, an institution that is autonomous but works closely with the UN on issues of peace and security, doing research, doing training, and being a think tank for the United Nations. Later still, I served as Under Secretary General and Special Representative for Children in Armed Conflict. And that is when I pioneered the inscription of the well-being, the protection of children, of civilians, as a legitimate item of peace and security on the agenda of Security Council. And the standards which have been developed and the regime which is now in place for the protection of children in conflict, I was leading that particular project, and it was a pioneering project at the United Nations. So I just want to say that in terms of background and experience, I think my background experience is very, very rich, very diverse. Most of the issues that needs to be tackled, I have a good idea about them. The member states, I've worked with them all in various capacities in the Security Council, General Assembly, Commission on Human Rights, all over the place. So I would hope that this might recommend me to them for positive consideration. Let me also say that at a personal level, I'm a good listener. My brother here knows. I like to listen. Listen long, listen patiently. But I'm also somebody whose mind comes up with ideas and with ways to get out of problems, creative ideas to get out of problems. That is why we have the Otunnu formula. That is why in 1983, when we had the Grenada crisis that pitted the West against the East and this General Assembly was paralyzed, I was chair of the Credential Committee. I proposed a solution that got us out of the problem. So a consensus builder and one who is not shy to propose possible solution that may be accepted by the protagonist in a situation of crisis and deadlock. And over the years, I think it can be said I'm not too bad when it comes to the humility department. Not too bad. I'm a relatively modest and humble and unassuming person. I'm not exactly your pompous type and one who is concerned that their name and their ego should be in the way. So I would hope that this combines and makes it possible for me to be a really first-rate Secretary General. And then finally, Uganda, even though the candidature is not about Uganda, but Uganda's contribution to the world should be mentioned. It's very important. Historically, Uganda has played a role that I think is second to none in terms of receiving those who are in distress from neighboring countries, receiving refugees. He and I went to school, I think from primary to secondary to university, with a lot of students from South Sudan, from Congo, from Rwanda, from the neighborhood, because Uganda has always been hospitable, receiving refugees from neighboring countries. This has not changed. And I think the world should remember Uganda for this, a historic contribution. In the last decade or so, Uganda has also been at the forefront of contributing to peace and security, especially in our region of Africa. You know, in Somalia, in South Sudan, in the Congo, all over in this region of Africa, and to peacekeeping mission further afield. Uganda has actually, from this point of view, been boxing above its weight. Uganda isn't a massive, huge country, but it's been playing a very active role relative to its size. So I say it's been boxing above its weight. Thank God for that. And I think the international community would do well to also recognize this, that Olara Otunnu comes from a country which has been engaged, which has been active, which has been paying its due as a good, responsible member of the international community. And then finally, I'm just very, very, very happy and very humbled that the people of Uganda, You know, the women in the marketplace, the students in the schools, those I encounter on the streets. There's an added spring to their steps since this thing was announced. You know, I'm so touched by that. And it's not about Olara Otunnu. It's about Uganda and the Ugandan people and what they have been able to offer to the world. So I'm very proud of you, and I hope that this project will do well by you. Thank you very much. Thank you, and God bless. There.
Thank you very much. What a submission and what a CV. And we look forward to seeing how it all plays out. At this juncture, I'd like to invite the Foreign Minister Designate, who is currently the permanent representative of Uganda to the United Nations, Ambassador Adonia Ayebare, to make a few remarks, and then we shall take your questions.
Thank you, Alan. Let me join Right Honorable and others for thanking you for having turned around this place. When I was here, they were building that small place. We were under that tree. but look at this. Thank you very much, Alan, for your leadership. Let me start off by recognizing my minister, Honorable Haruna Kasoro, Right Honorable Ruhakana Rugunda, Ndugu Ruhakana Rugunda, and Dr. Otunnu. Let me really thank the Foreign Ministry. The President gave us 24 hours when he decided to submit the candidature of Dr. Olara Otunnu. And within those 24 hours, a lot was done. Submitting the paperwork to New York, to both the President of the General Assembly and to the President of the Security Council. And also they have given support staff to Honorable Otunnu and facilitated him to really, that is really good support. As permanent representative of Uganda to the UN, that's where the campaign is moving. And in the coming days, yeah, in my territory, and I can really confirm that we are ready to receive you. My team is ready to receive you and facilitate you to do your campaign for UN Secretary General. Let me say that we are really have an experience of winning such a positions for the UN that are more complex, like the International Court of Justice, which both of the gentlemen know. Let me also mention that there is a lot in common here, except you. There is a lot in common that Right Honorable Rugunda was ambassador at the UN. Dr. Olara Otunnu, like he said, was ambassador at the UN. I'm ambassador at the UN. And I think we are a formidable team. We will give it a shot. Let me also mention that we really need to thank President Yoweri Museveni. And I think Dr. Olara said it. I mean, yesterday I was thinking as we're at State House, as a Ugandan diplomat who has been in diplomacy for some decades, that President Yoweri Museveni and Dr. Olara Otunnu are in one room. I was pinching myself. See if that was real. They didn't. That really, that speaks of the country has moved on in terms of our leaders seeing eye to eye. And this confirms this project as a national project. It's a Ugandan project. It's not an Olara project. It's for all of us. And I think that's why we're here, to really make it a national project and make it work. Like Dr. Olara Otunnu says, it's a very complex process, but he simplified it very well. And I think we can really, under the leadership of Right Honorable Rugunda, I think we will make it. We will do Uganda proud. And what is important to me is that Dr. Olara is going to be given an opportunity to really present his vision to the rest of the world. And always people ask, what is the role of the Secretary General? The role of the Secretary General is more of a secretary than a general. He has no army, but moral persuasion. And Dr. Olara Otunnu has the right profile. There are 3 pillars of the United Nations: human rights, peace and security, and development. And he has literally worked across the 3 pillars. And I don't remember of any Secretary General that has done that. You know, Kofi Annan, you can argue that he was more of a peace and security person. He was not a development person and not a human rights person. So he's really the most qualified candidate, and with due respect to other 6 candidates, some of them are my colleagues at the UN. I think he comes in, and there was a question, but he has been out of saturation for a long time. And with my humble experiences, that is an advantage. He's not tainted by the recent past, either in the international circles. And what does he confront as Secretary General? I'm not going to use if, I'm going to use when. When you are elected, you'll be confronted with, you are going to be confronted with geopolitics. We have 3 major wars that are going on. You are going to be confronted with a climate crisis that is running out of proportion, a global health crisis with pandemics, and that will really need experience and a consensus builder like you to really take the world forward. Again, I look forward in the coming days to welcome you in New York, and we will continue through the media center, the country informed of what is going on, and everything with social media now is relatively open. So Aaron, I will stop here to
Thank you very much. Where's Mr. Serumaga from the media center? Okay, take over from here.
My question goes to Dr. Olara. You said peace and security remains the UN's most important mandate. If elected, where would you focus your efforts first and why? The second question. You describe the Secretary General as someone who builds consensus and proposes creative solutions. Can you share an example from your career where you've had to play that part from? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Otunnu, I want to take this opportunity to wish you all the best for being Uganda's representative as a UN Secretary General. My name is Shakira Kavma from Media Plus. Talking about security, I want to ask you what strategy that you're going to use to make sure that the 3 major wars that Ambassador Doni has talked about, I think he meant the war about Gaza, he meant Gaza and Israeli war, then Russia and Ukraine, then the joint war between Iran, Iraq and US. I want you to tell the Ugandans or the world the strategy that you're going to use that the current Secretary General Antonio Guterres has not used, because we've seen a lot of engagements on the major media houses where UN has always sat, negotiate about the wars. Before you know it, you see there is a ceasefire. Before you know it, you see a war has come up. So what strategy are you going to use to make sure that the world can be at peace? Thank you.
I'm called Musings Branche and I work with Africa Report magazine. Ambassador, I have 2 questions for you. The first UN straw poll happened last week and you got only 2 positive votes. So now you need more 7 positive votes and you have a limited amount of time. As you said, you cannot get to the US, but also the current US government, it's very unpredictable. It can tell you A today and it does B tomorrow. So You are not sure when you are going to get to New York and start campaigning vigorously. What's your plan B and C and D if you don't get an opportunity to be in New York in the next couple of weeks? The second question is,
Please continue.
the second question is, your views on President Museveni have been known for a long time. And as Ambassador Adonia Yebare said, you were in the same room yesterday, you were in the same room yesterday. How do you feel about the President Museveni, and do you think that he has genuine support for you? Finally, United Nations is about human rights, peace and development. Can you comment about the state of human rights in Uganda as it is right now?
Thank you. My name is Daniel Kibet. I work for NTV. First question goes to Ambassador Adonia Ebare. You said the president gave you about 24 hours to ensure that Olara Otunnu has been nominated. Could you please tell us why Uganda decided to nominate Olara Otunnu so late in the process? The other question as well might go to you or might go to the Foreign Affairs Minister, the acting. What is the concrete diplomatic strategy to overcome the widely held view that it is the turn of Latin America, and how does Uganda plan to secure enough support among the 5 permanent members of the UN, of course, of the Security Council rather, who hold veto power? I know that there's for sure no written rule in the UN Charter about regional rotation, but the position has historically rotated among the world's 5 geographical regions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. You can respond.
Thank you. Do I press anything here? It's automatic. Thank you for the questions. The person from GTV, I think, asked 2 questions. First, what I would do about major ongoing conflicts. Most of the major ongoing conflicts, especially the examples which were given over Iran, situation in Gaza, Ukraine, these are conflicts with huge geopolitical factors at play, where the front row seats in these conflicts are being detained by the major powers. So it is not easy for the UN to influence the course of the conflicts. But that being said, the UN should never be absent, especially the Secretary General. He should always be present, he should always be engaging them, he should always be probing and always looking for opportunities to be helpful. Even if we know that ultimately it depends on them. I'll give you examples later of both Grenada and the Otunnu formula, where the ideas, the suggestion, the proposal came from Olara Otunnu, of Uganda only. But it's the major powers who accepted to work with it. So the UN Secretary General should be engaged, should be present, should be listening, should be probing the opportunities to be helpful. Now, when we come to the other conflicts, especially in our region of Africa, I think there clearly the Secretary General can take maybe even a more proactive role for the conflicts which are closer to us in this region. So that is with regard to the conflicts. Now, with regard to examples, I think the questioner said, what examples do you give of building consensus and proposing creative solutions? Well, very quickly, let me give you 3 examples. One, I already mentioned the Otunnu formula, which is alive to this day. 2, the Grenada crisis. Grenada is a little island in the Caribbean. And in 1983, all hell broke loose. The president was assassinated. Some troops went in from outside. There was a change of regime. There was chaos. And within the United Nations General Assembly, this was directly reflected because we then had 2 delegations, both claiming to represent Grenada. And if we did not resolve that issue, the General Assembly could not continue with its activities. It couldn't sit, it couldn't deliberate, because we had to resolve who takes the seat of Grenada. I happened to be at the time the chair of the Credentials Committee. And so I spoke with the US, spoke with the Soviet Union, with Cuba, with China, with Russia, and I was able to come up with an idea that they accepted to solve the problem, and the General Assembly was able to resume its work with the cooperation of everybody concerned. This is another example of key geopolitical context, but a small person, a small country, facilitating, suggesting something that paves the way for them. The third example I can give, you can look this up, by the way, those of you who are very savvy with the internet, that I was the one who was able to persuade the Security Council members to incorporate the welfare, the protection of children, particularly children, women, civilians, as a legitimate substantive peace and security issue of the Security Council. Not incidental, because previously the main concern was about the security of states. But I brought the issue letting those who suffer disproportionately when there is war, that their well-being, their protection should be a substantive issue of the Security Council. And it has become, and then proceeded to put in place various measures. You've heard of the list of commitments made by parties in conflict. I pioneered that. Commitments which are then held as threshold for them. You've heard of the naming and shaming, the list which is produced periodically by the UN of parties who are abusing children and women. I was the one who pioneered this. You've heard of child protection advisors in peace missions around the globe. I pioneered that. So the whole regime in place, a very comprehensive regime of protection for children and women in situations of conflict, and I was very much at the forefront of that. Similarly, by the way, when you look at the Rome Statute is the law that provided for the International Criminal Court. I was very much involved in the creation of the International Criminal Court as an idea, and then in elaborating the statute, which is the law for the court. And if you look carefully, most of the provisions which have been invoked up till now, most of the indictments of people who are taken before the ICC, most of them have been indicted on provisions that I inscribed in the Rome Statute, because most of them are to do with the recruitment, the abuse, the brutalization of children. So I just give those as examples of how a little person, the representative of a relatively small country, can play a large role by building consensus and by proposing creative solutions. Okay? Now, the media plus person also asked about conflicts. I've already answered that. Yes, that the key ones, obviously, Ukraine and situation in Gaza and Iran, those are major players, and I've already given an answer to that. Then the Africa Post person said the first straw polls and what I got in the first straw polls. Well, actually, it's a miracle that Olara Otunnu got 2 positive votes. For my life, I don't even know the brave souls, bless them, who gave me two votes. Because of the situation I described earlier, we have not been able to engage the electors. We have not been able to meet the delegations, go to their capitals, canvass for support, lay out, as I've laid to you, our vision of what we'll do for the UN. All the other candidates, some of them now a year and a half, 1 year, many months, they have been canvassing, they've been engaging them. So it's natural that the member states would have well-defined position vis-a-vis them. But most delegations would have the position understandable that, look, until we meet the candidate, until we hear from the candidate, until we ask questions to the candidate, we cannot formulate our position. It's entirely understandable. So really, I think the verdict on Olara Otunnu is still reserved. We shall find out soon when we get to New York, engage the member states, put our case to them, then we shall have an idea what their verdict is on Olara Otunnu. But I think the first straw poll was important for the other candidates. I think less significant in terms of its message vis-a-vis Olara Otunnu, but I hope we shall remedy that very soon. We don't presume anything. We don't assume anything. We shall put our case and leave it to the good electors to make up their mind and to clarify their position. I think there was also the, yes. The views of President Museveni and whether the support is genuine, and also the difference between he and I. Yeah. First, Olara Otunnu remains Olara Otunnu. Olara Otunnu has not changed. President Museveni remains President Museveni. We have areas of divergent views that he knows well, I know well. We discuss it. We've discussed it even recently. It is not a secret that in the past, on 2 occasions, President Museveni himself has said this, that on 2 previous occasions, when Olara Otunnu was the front runner for the position of Secretary General, the government of Uganda blocked that process. President Museveni has said this. So you know it, I know it. But what is significant is that in spite of that, I'm not in government, I'm not a minister in government, I'm not like my brother, a member of the NRM, he's in SEC of the NRM. So what is interesting is different. What is interesting that in spite of this, that there is NRM, there are those who are not in NRM, there are those in government, those who are not in government. There have been differences, significant differences between me and President Museveni. We continue to discuss them. We continue to discuss about national dialogue, about reconciliation. That in spite of that, we have come together as Ugandans to support a common Ugandan project. That's the big news. Not that the differences have disappeared, but that in spite of that, we have been mature enough to say, yes, we continue discussing our differences, but we're all Ugandans. And this is a project for Uganda, by Ugandans. That is what it's big. And I think for that, we thank President Museveni and the government and all Ugandans. And that's the spirit in which we should move forward. So that would be my answer to that question. And then the issue of human rights in Uganda. Well, I have been a fighter for human rights all my adult life. We cut our teeth in the political arena fighting for human rights with my brother here in the Idi Amin period, when it was not fashionable to take a stand on human rights. And I've continued all my life. I've given you examples when it wasn't popular to speak and support the International Criminal Court. I, as Uganda's representative, on my recommendation to Kampala, Uganda was one of the very, very few, actually I think one of only 3 African countries that sponsored and supported the establishment of ICC. The same with the High Commission for Human Rights. It was very unpopular. Uganda was one of the very few countries that took the front seat in supporting that. I've chaired the Commission on Human Rights. When the work that I've described now about children is essential about the human rights of children. It's essential about human rights. That's what it is about. I've just now told you how I've spent the last several years back in the belly of the countryside. What have I been working on? Quintessentially a human rights project. How do we give a place under the sun again to these people whose society has collapsed, who have nothing at all because of the years of war? So really, in terms of, I think, human rights, this is something which is very close to my heart, will always be. And if I become Secretary General, I will continue to champion human rights. I want to see all over the world that people, every person deserves to have a life of freedom and dignity. And I'll champion this across the globe. So that is my position. And if you wish to look it up in the archives, please do. It is all on the record. And obviously, I will dialogue with all countries, all leaders concerning human rights without discrimination. That is my position. Okay, I think I've answered all the questions. The one which I have not answered, Ambassador Yebare will answer.
Thank you very much. I think the two questions are from the gentleman there. Why submitting the candidature of Dr. Olara Otunnu very late? I think that can be best be answered by the president, because for us we received marching orders. But I want to add that it's actually not late. I think Dr. Olara Otunnu will agree with me that in the past selection of the Secretary Generals, there are names that have come out late, including the current Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. He was the last one to bring in his candidature. I think what is important is that he gets a chance to engage member states and present his vision. It's not late, and I think it was John Brashe who talked about the US. I think we already got the clearance to travel. We already got the clearance. I think by the end of this week, we will be in New York to engage the member states, and I think the straw polls are an indicator. They are not really, and every candidate got a negative vote from the P5. So the race is wide open. On the issue whether it's the turn of Latin America, no, it's not accurate. I think the only region that can claim to not have produced a Secretary General is Eastern Europe. Latin America has produced a Secretary General and many other regions. I think that formula has been thrown up in the air by the way the Secretary General is selected, and there is no exclusive turn for any region, any of the regions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Ayebale.
Let me just add a historical footnote. In 1981, when Perez de Cuellar was elected, it was thought to be the turn of Africa. And Africa had solidified behind Salim Salim. When things got deadlocked and the field was open to allow new candidates to come through, Salim Salim wasn't succeeded by an African. It was all others who came in the field. I remember Sridath Ramphal from Guyana, and of course Perez de Cuellar. I remember Sadudin Aga Khan from all over. They all entered the field, even though it was thought to be Africa's turn. And in the end, it was somebody from Latin America who got elected. This last time, as Ambassador has said, it was thought to be Eastern Europe. And most of those who were fielded were from Eastern Europe. But in the end, it's a Western European, a former Prime Minister of Portugal, who was elected Secretary General. Just very recently, while in Gulu, I was reading, President Trump was reported in the media that he was thinking, he was musing about the possibility of Gianni, the FIFA president, becoming Secretary General. Well, as you know, Gianni is from Switzerland, from Western Europe. So just to say that obviously There should be equity. Obviously, one particular region of the world should not dominate. Obviously, things should, change hands. But all that taken into account, I think most member states, from what I hear, would say where we are at the UN right now, where we are in the world right now, the challenges we are facing, that perhaps the most important consideration is to look across the globe and get the best person available to help the UN and help the world.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Otunnu. At this moment, allow me to invite our Executive Director, Mr. Alan Kasuji, to give us the opening remarks, closing remarks, and then I shall close with a group picture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this has been a very powerful submission. And my takeaway is that Uganda is a beautiful country. It's a country that is blessed with deep talent. And like Ambassador Otunnu said, there are Ugandans who are competent to operate anywhere. And this is a reflection of that. And the fact that Ambassador Otunnu and President Museveni are collaborating on this project in itself is a testimony of the character of this country. That Ugandans will always have contradictions, we shall always have differences, but in the end, we have one Uganda to serve, and we will always come together to serve the fatherland. On behalf of Uganda Media Center, we first of all wish you the very best, sir, and you can be assured of our complete support. We shall be behind you all the way. And again, it's an honor to have all of you here. And wherever you are watching this from, thank you very much for being a part of this broadcast.